25 minus 10 minus 5, which we already know is 10. And so let's now log both of these values to the console. And what do you think will happen? You can really try to think about this before checking the result. And so, what is it going to be? And actually, let's delete this one first, so to avoid some confusion there. And so, we see that x and y are both 10. And so let's analyze why that happens. So when JavaScript first finds this line of code here to execute, it will look at all the operators that are present, and it will see the minus operators, and so it will start with these because they have a higher precedence. Right? So assignment has only 3, but where is it? Here it is. So the subtraction has a 14. And so of course it's going to be executed first and left to right. And so as we already know, this here will turn out to be 10. And so let's just write that here. So after these minus operations, we end up with this code, basically. So x equals y equals 10, right? Because again, 10 is the result of doing these operations. And so now we only have 2 operators left, which are the equal operators. And so now they are executed. But as I showed you before, they are executed right to left. So from this side here, starting from the 10 to this side. And so what happens is that we will have y equals 10. And so at this point, y is equal to 10. And so what we have then is x equal to 10. Okay? And then after that, we're only left with x equal 10. And so at the end, both x and y are going to be 10. Okay? Maybe that sounded a bit confusing, but that's just how it works when you evaluate from right to left. And actually, that's the way it has to be. Because if it was the other way around, this wouldn't work. Just imagine if we had this assignment working from left to right. Then x would be equal to y. And y is undefined at this point, remember? Because we declared it here as an empty variable. And so, again, if assignment would be from left to right, then first x would be equal to y, which would be undefined, and then y would be equal to 10. And so that's not the result that we expect here. And so once more, the way this works is actually very logical and makes a lot of sense. So I hope that made sense. And now to finish, let's just check out the one with the highest precedence, which is this grouping. So basically using parentheses. And that actually works just like in mathematics, where operations within parentheses are also executed first. So I hope you remember that from school. And a great example is to calculate the average of 2 values. So we have H Jonas and H Sarah, and so let's calculate the average age of these 2 people. So let's actually start by logging their ages to the console, just so we see. So H Jonas and H Sarah, and now I want to calculate the average. And actually let's do that here above that. So let's say average age. And once more, don't forget the descriptive variable names. So average age describes exactly what this variable is going to hold. So to calculate an average, we need to add 2 values together and then divide them by 2. At least that's when we have just 2 values. So let's say H Jonas plus H Sarah. So that's the addition, and then divided by 2. But now what is going to happen? Well, according to our precedence table, we have the division here happening before the subtraction. So this is 15 and this is a 14. And so what happens first is H Sarah is going to be divided by 2, and then the H of Jonas is going to be added. So let's actually log that result here as well. And so here the average age is now 55.5, which really doesn't make any sense, because how can the average be larger than one of the 2 ages, right? And so that's where the parentheses come in. So by using parentheses, once more, just like in mathematics, we can make it so that this operation here is executed first. Okay, so basically everything that is within the parentheses, which have the precedence of 21, right? So now this one is executed first, and then the division. And so, yeah, now it makes sense. Okay, I hope that wasn't too confusing, and now you're actually ready for your first coding challenge. So I hope to see you soon in the next video for your first challenge. It's now finally time for your very first coding challenge. So coding challenges are basically coding exercises that you have to code on your own. And they are super important for you to test and reinforce all the skills that you just learned before. That's why there are dozens of coding challenges in this course, because students love them and they are one of the best ways of learning. And so this is the coding challenge number 1 of the section, or coding exercise if you prefer to call it that. Now all of these coding challenges are also in a separate PDF file that is available somewhere in the course. So you can also get this text from there. You don't have to read the video, okay? Now anyway, the exercise is this. Mark and John are trying to compare their body mass indexes. And the BMI is calculated using this formula. So BMI is equal the mass divided by the height squared, okay? And so squared is the exponentiation operator that we talked about before with the 2, okay? And so that is also the same to mass equals height times height. Okay, so this part is the same as this one. So you can choose to calculate the BMI either way. Now what matters is that the mass needs to be in kilograms and the height needs to be in meters. So it's not going to work with the US measures like feet and pound. But that's why I have the test data here already with the correct measurements. Anyway, here is what I want you to do for this challenge. 1, you should store Mark's and John's mass and height in variables. And you should do this for test data 1, so this data here, and then also for test data 2. Alright? Then, using these variables, calculate both their BMIs using the formula that I just showed you. And again, you can use either one. It's going to work the same way. Of course, to then check these values if they make sense, you can log them to the console, just like we have been doing up until this point. Then, finally, I want you to create a Boolean variable called mark higher BMI, which will contain the information whether Mark has a higher BMI than John, okay? And this is actually similar to something that we did before, so I hope that you can make this one work just fine. So now, please really try to solve this problem on your own. And remember the advice that I gave you in the beginning. Don't try to make this perfect for now. What matters is really just to make it work. Doesn't matter if you write clean code or perfect code or efficient code. Just make it work for now, alright? So pause the video now, and I see you in a second with the solution. make it work for now, alright? So pause the video now, and I see you in a second with the solution. Alright, I hope you managed to complete all the 3 points of this challenge. And so here is how I would have implemented it. So I'm starting with number 1, of course, and so let's say const mass mark equals 78. Okay, so that's just what is written here. And then height mark equals 169. And then the same for John. So mass John equals 92. And then height John equals 195. Alright? And if you use different variable names, that's not a problem at all. As long as they are nicely descriptive, like these ones here, you're gonna be fine. Also, you might have used let here instead of const, because you might assume that these are values that are susceptible to change, especially here, the mass, right? However, I still decided to use const because I already know that I'm not going to change these values here throughout the program. And so just as we learned before, I prefer to always use const by default, and I advise you to actually do the same. Okay? Anyway, let's now calculate the actual BMIs. So const BMI mark equals mass mark divided, and let's check out the formula again, divided by the height squared. So that's going to be height mark squared. And then the BMI John, so that's mass John, and this time let's actually use the other formula, so this one here. So we're going to use height John times height John again. Okay, and now let's log both of them to the console here. So BMI mark and BMI John. And now we have an error here. Oh, of course, I missed the dot log. Okay, try it again, and here we go. So we see that BMI mark is higher than John's BMI. Okay, so I hope you got the same numbers here than I did, and if not, I guess you should probably check your code, unless I have some mistake here. Let me check that actually, but I think everything is good. Okay, so if something is wrong, then please just let me know. Alright? Now, if you implemented this in a different way, for example, you might not have created these separate variables here, then that's not a problem at all. Okay? You could have logged these calculations straight to the console. No problem at all. Again, what matters here is that you make this work, and that in the end you get these same results here. Anyway, let's now also do step 3 and create a variable called mark higher BMI. So let's just grab this here and const. And so what we're trying to figure out is if the BMI of Mark is higher than the BMI of John, right? And so that's what comparison operators are for. Because remember that this one here will return either true or false. In our example, if BMI Mark is larger than the one of John, then the result of this whole operator here will be true. And otherwise, it's going to be false. Okay? So that's exactly what we did before in this example with the ages, if I remember correctly. So where's that? Ah, yeah, it's right here. In this case, it was the isFullAge variable, right? Okay. Anyway, let's log it here to the console as well. And so we expect this one to be true, right? Because Mark's BMI is 27 and John's is 24. And so Mark's is larger, and so the result of this should be true. So let's check that. And indeed, we get true. Nice. So we basically solved it. Now I just want to do the same here for task data 2. So we'll just copy this. So copy, and then I will simply comment out these first ones. So now I'm replacing these with 95, 188, and then here for John we have 85 and 176. And the rest, of course, is the same. And that's the beauty of using variables, because now all we have to do is to change these values in one place, and then the changes will be propagated to the rest of the code here, which references these variables. Cool, so let's reload, And now BMI of John is 27, so it's larger than 26.8. It's actually very close, but still, BMI Mark is now lower than BMI John. So here we ask the question, basically, is BMI Mark larger than BMI John? And in this case, it's not, so it's false. And so that's exactly the result that we get here. Alright, so this one is solved, and I hope you solved it as well. Again, it does not matter at all if you did it in a different way, as long as the results were the same. So basically, as long as you actually made it work. So, hopefully that was a lot of fun, and you could practice your skills a little bit, which is really something essential to learn programming properly. Without repetition and reinforcing your knowledge, it's impossible really to learn how to code. Anyway, see you now in the next video, where we're going to continue learning the fundamentals of the beautiful JavaScript language. Strings are a very important part of programming, and so let's now learn about an easy way to build strings using something called template literals. And let's start by creating some new variables here about a person, and in this case about me, so that we can then concatenate them into one big string. And the birth year. Okay, and so let's now use these variables to build a string, something like, I'm Jonas, a 40 or 30-year-old teacher. So we're gonna then use this birth year to calculate the age, of course. So let's call that one simply Jonas, and as we already learned in one of the previous lectures, we can use the plus sign to concatenate strings. And so let's now start by doing that. So I want to write I'm, and here I'm seeing a problem. So when I want to use this single quote here for writing something like I'm or isn't, so basically when I need this symbol here, then I need to write the string itself using double quotes. Okay? Because otherwise the single quote that I'm using here for I'm will finish the string. So I'm, and then I need a space, and the plus, and so here I'm saying I'm Jonas. Let's create strings the same way. So right now we have I'm Jonas, comma, a, and now we want the age. So let's say a 30-year-old teacher. So we need another space here. And then let's actually calculate the age. So that's the current year. So let's put that here as well. And let's again say that the year is 2037. So plus year minus the birth year. Now in order to make this work, we actually need to put this operation between parentheses. Like this. And so we'll do the calculation first, and then the concatenation. But you might be wondering, well, the result of this is going to be a number, right? But the rest of the things that we're adding here are strings. So how is this going to work? Well, this has to do with something called type coercion, which is something that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this section. But basically, JavaScript will simply convert this number to a string so that it can concatenate them, so that it can join them with the rest of the strings. So you will see that it's going to work just fine. Okay, years old, and then the job. And then we can finish with an exclamation mark or something like that. Alright, and then let's also log this to the console so we can take a look at it. Okay, so I'm Jonas, a 46 years old teacher, and we're missing some spaces here, so that's around the years old. And you see that this is kind of a pain to manage these spaces and well, to keep track kind of how the sentence is structured. And so we will see a great solution to that in a second. So now it works, and yeah, just as expected. So as I was saying, for a complex string like this one, this can be kind of a pain. And so that's why, starting with ES6, we have a much better tool for doing this kind of stuff now, which is called template literals. So with template literals, we can write a string in a more normal way, and then basically insert the variables directly into the string, and then they will simply be replaced. So basically a template literal can assemble multiple pieces into one final string. So let me show you how that works. So let's call this one Jonas new. And now to write a template literal, we need to use backticks. So that's this symbol here. And on the English keyboard, you will find this one above the tab key. So again, we really need to use these backticks to tell JavaScript that we're writing a template string. The single quotes or the double quotes won't work for what we're going to do now. So now, as I said, we simply write a string and insert the variables in there. So I'm, and then we use the $, curly braces, and then the variable name. So I'm first name. And just to see if this actually works, let's log it to console. So that's Jonas new. And indeed, I am Jonas. So you see that this is much easier because all we have is this one string, and then here we used this syntax to insert the first name variable. And now we can continue this, and it's going to be a lot easier. A, and then again a variable. Now in this case, we actually need a calculation, and that's no problem at all. We can basically write any JavaScript here inside of these curly braces. Alright? Technically you can write any expressions, but more about expressions in one of the later lectures. So year minus birth year, just as we did above. Year, old, and then teacher. So no plus signs, no thinking where we should put the spaces like we did here. And so this is a lot easier. Let's reload. Oh, and indeed, there is a bug here, so of course, that's not teacher, that's actually the value of the variable job that we're interested in here. But once again, we found this bug because we simply read the error message. So get into this habit of always reading the error message to try to figure out where you are wrong. Alright? And now, of course, it works, and I hope that you can see that this is a way easier way of writing this string. This really kind of assembles the string using the pieces that we give it. For example, this variable here, or this value that is produced by the minus operator. Great, so now you know how template strings work in JavaScript, and in particular in ES6. And actually it's one of the most used ES6 features. It's really amazing and really useful in many situations. Now I just wanted to let you know that we can actually also use backticks to write all strings. So strings where we do not insert any of these kind of placeholders here, like this. So we just demonstrate that to you. So we can use backticks for any regular string. So you see that it works here just the same. And many developers actually started using backticks for all strings, because then you don't have to think about which quotation marks you should use. You just use backticks always. And then in case you need to insert a variable, then it's much easier than to go back and switch out the regular quotes. So that's a choice that you can make. I actually don't do that myself, but I can see that it actually makes sense. Alright, now another great use case of template literals is to create multi-line strings. So that's something that before template strings was a bit cumbersome to write. Let me just show that to you. So if you wanted a multi-line string before ES6, you would have to write string with, and then you needed this \n, which in many programming languages means new line. Alright, so basically this is like a special character in programming, which in strings always means that a new line should be created. And then in JavaScript we would need another \, like this, and then we could move to the next line and continue here. Multiple, let's create a new one, and then lines. And this actually only works because of a bug that's in the language. But let's see. So we get string with multiple lines. And you see that it's all the same string, but yeah, spread across multiple lines. But indeed, now with template strings, there is an easier way of doing this. So all we have to do is simply hit return, and it will create a new line for us. And this is actually going to be immensely useful later when we start building HTML from JavaScript. So by then we will be able to use these backticks to create multi-line HTML elements to insert them onto a page dynamically. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Let's just see if this works, and indeed it does. So whenever you need a multi-line string, you always make sure to use this template literal, because it's a lot cleaner. Alright, and that's actually it about template literals. In the next lecture, we will finally start to make our code a lot more fun and take it to the next level by taking decisions.